Well, happy Saturday, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Appreciate you all joining me here. Hopefully, you enjoyed or maybe didn't enjoy the winter weather you got here in parts of the South. Well, things are going to quiet down here for some time, but we're not done for winter. In fact, it looks like potentially some bigger challenges coming to us here around Martin Luther King Day and into that following week. When maybe it's going to be colder and we may see the winter threat even farther south than what we just dealt with. Again, that is a little bit off in the distance, but we are going to talk about that here for the second part of this video. First, I am going to recap the weather we had here over the last week. We're going to talk about California, what to expect this weekend with the potential fire danger. And we're going to take a look at what's still going on the eastern seaboard here with temperatures, snow, that sort of thing over the next couple of days before we look at the longer term. So I appreciate you all joining me. I am a meteorologist in the Raleigh area and a little bit disappointed in how our storm played out here at where I live on my side of Wake County. Really not much snow, more sleet and ice than anything else, which is obviously the worst. Kids can't play in that. Obviously, it makes for difficult travel, so not very pretty. But we've been blessed with some warmer temperatures this afternoon, getting up into the upper 30s here. And you can see most of the country is really not all that bad compared to where we've been. It's still chilly out there, but temperatures recovering nicely in the plains. Florida still in the 50s and 60s. Where it is cold is the Southwest. California is a little chillier. Arizona certainly is colder, and it will stay that way here over the next couple of days. Here's a look at snowfall that's fallen here with our storm, and the Midwest didn't do all that bad when you get south towards Interstate 70. Michigan, we saw a few inches as well, but take a look at some of these numbers here. Sorry for the slow responding screen here. Parts of the panhandle of Texas got up to a foot in the Amarillo area, Canyon in particular. OKC got a few inches. When you get south and east of there, up to 6 in the Norman area. Places like Hara and as much as a foot in Lamar and 14 inches in Mena. So the hillier areas did really well. When you get down to DFW, we did fine towards the Red River, up to 6 to 7 inches. DFW itself got a couple inches south of the Metroplex, so very little. Farther to the east, Tennessee, moderate snowfall. Northern Mississippi and Alabama didn't do all that bad. We saw 4 to 6 inches in many places, but we did have some overachievers here. And in particular, the Atlanta area yesterday morning, I really hope people took that seriously. I've been watching videos of folks doing donuts on 85 and 75, which I guess it's entertaining, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, what is wrong with these folks? But anyway, no judgment here. But ATL, we did about 3 to 6 inches, as much as 5.8 in Druid Hills and DeKalb County, and a few more inches as well, just to the east of Atlanta. But then we hit a wall where we got to I-85, and things ended up turning warmer aloft. So places like Greenville and Charlotte and up to Durham and Raleigh saw some snow, but not really as much as I think what a lot of folks were wishing for. We had more sleet and then eventually freezing rain as that warm layer kicked in. And you can blame that on the Gulf of Mexico because the Gulf has been running warmer than average for a while now. And there was enough influence aloft to get a warmer layer in there to allow what was falling to melt and then refreeze as it was coming into the lower part of the atmosphere. And so as a result, we had to draw the line somewhere an inch northward into the north side of the triangle. Greensboro got a few inches, Stokesdale 2.5. RVA didn't do too bad. We saw between 2 and 5 inches with the highest amounts in places like Chesterfield and Amelia counties. But even southeastern Virginia, Eastern Shore, we got a couple of inches of snow as well. And today we're dealing with it into New England. Now you can see there is a snow hole still in place on the south coast, and we can blame that on the Atlantic Ocean. But in all reality, what's going on is that we have two pieces of energy, and one has taken the southern route, one has taken the northern route. And a few days ago, we were teased with those maybe potentially merging together. That has not happened, though. So the southern route took over, and now the northern route's coming in on the backside. And we're seeing quite a bit of snow in parts of Vermont and some across central New England, but it's just not really a big system for us here. So, and you can see right now, we don't have any hazards set up for New England. We do have in purple winter weather advisories over portions of Montana and the Intermountain West here, over Minnesota and North Dakota, and over parts of the mid and upper Ohio Valley. We actually have winter storm warnings as well over portions of southern West Virginia, including Beckley, and just south of Charleston and Huntington. We do have some winter storm warning as well in the hills of eastern Kentucky, places like Tazewell County here in Virginia, and across the Smokies in North Carolina, and a winter weather advisory in northern Alabama, which I think is actually going to be for black ice, not necessarily for any additional precipitation. And going back to this map, You'll see freeze warnings in Arizona, including Phoenix and Mesa area. And you'll see a freeze watch as well for the Southern Valley of California. And of course, we have more of a fire danger as well that I'm going to talk about in a second. Check out the visible image, though. This is really neat. You can see a cloud shadow very clearly here with our upper level disturbance moving through. And behind it, some clouds bubbling up again in the Carolinas. But we do have sun peeking out. So this is the cloud shield. We have gravity waves coming in behind it in North Georgia and Alabama. You see the horizontal ripples here? This is caused by instability. It's colder air going over a slightly warmer air mass. And then you can see where the snow is on the ground here. And here's where the snowpack now extends. It's north of Charlotte, north of Raleigh, and just into the northwest corner, the Clemson corner, I call it here in South Carolina, and then down into this portion of Alabama and Georgia. So neat looking image here for sure. Not a pretty day in Florida, though. We got a lot of cloud cover in place and moisture moving in here aloft. This is the water vapor image. And you can see we do have, this is the northern branch feature I talked about, producing some light to moderate snow, except in the mountains. Here's a southern branch feature, so the two are not linking up. And here is southwesterly flow coming over the southeastern United States here, keeping it cloudier and chilly. We do have another trough digging down here into the western United States, but it's going to get stuck there for a while. And instead of moving through the south like we saw last week, there's going to be a block in place over the eastern United States. And what will happen is we are going to see disturbances moving through from the polar regions across the Midwest and the Great Lakes region, but nothing that links up here with the southern United States. Now, we do need to watch this trough as it moves into southern Cal. It's bringing cooler, drier air down with it, but also an increase in upper level wind flow. And as a result, we're going to see another day where we need to be concerned about winds picking up late in the afternoon, and especially this evening. Especially north of LA again, and then into Ventura County, we have gusts that may get over 50 miles per hour and even higher through the canyons late this evening and overnight. Orange County here in the mountains, over 60 mile per hour gusts look possible according to our NAM model. So this is not the news you probably want to see, and my thoughts and prayers are with everybody here impacted by the storms. I don't care who you vote for, what you look like. Nobody wants to see anything like this happening, okay? It's just very difficult. I just can't even imagine something like that even happening where I live. And obviously, I'm praying for these folks out here. The winds do die down here later tomorrow. They will try to ramp up a little bit here back into the overnight hours heading into Monday, primarily in northern LA County, Ventura County, but maybe even parts of Santa Barbara County. So Malibu, we should see that smoke going by to your north, but Oxnard, we need to be watching here as we get into the early part of Monday. I think we are going to see less wind over time. But you can see that window we need to be watching late tonight into tomorrow, and then again later tomorrow night into Monday morning. The sundowner winds are certainly going to be with us. And there's just no moisture in place to do much about it. It's a little bit less dry today. The dew point comes up into the 40s in LA this afternoon. But you can see here the next push of dry comes down, and we're down into the teens again. Chapstick weather for sure. And tomorrow, definitely going to be a little bit drier, except right on the coastline here up from LA and down from Long Beach towards Orange County. But here's the next push of dry air coming, and we get into the single digits here in our dew point values here late tomorrow night and Sunday morning, or Monday morning, I'm sorry. And then you can see it's still pretty dry here. So unfortunately, the dry weather longer term, the increase in wind flow with our trough swinging down and the dry air all creating very hazardous weather. And so we are going to have smoky conditions continuing, kind of an east to west flow here during the day today. And then we start to see that pushing more to the south towards the islands offshore, including LA. So things are not going to be great here this afternoon or evening. And then we go back to a northeast to southwest wind direction overnight into tomorrow. And you can see here, unfortunately, our smoke density looks like it is going to ramp back up in Santa Monica, Pacific Palisades, Topanga Canyon, those areas, Will Rogers State Park, and then eventually back into the south side of LA here late tomorrow, and then spreading back offshore with that northeast to southwest wind direction here late tomorrow night and into Monday. So we're going to obviously watch that for you all here, for those of you that are joining or have family out west. Here's what we're looking at in the east. And you can see our storm system bringing some light to moderate snow into parts of New England and maybe even Cape Cod this afternoon. And then here's our next system. It doesn't look like much, but very high snow to liquid ratios here with that colder air coming down. And so we are going to see a decent amount of snow in Minnesota here tonight, spreading into Wisconsin and then upper Michigan by tomorrow. This is going to track over Lake Superior. Most of the cold wind is north of the low track, but we obviously are going to see some of that even into northern Ohio and into Michigan and in southwest Ontario later tomorrow into tomorrow night. And this doesn't totally miss the northeastern U.S., but it's not really a big deal for us. Down south, we do have some lighter showers moving down through Florida. We get a break tomorrow, and then we start to see moisture building tomorrow evening in Louisiana and southeastern Texas. And then more wet weather, cool and wet weather for the central Gulf Coast states tomorrow night, spreading east towards Florida and southern Georgia and Alabama here for Monday. We're not going to be talking about severe weather. The wind flow aloft is not super strong, and the air mass is too cool to really deal with severe weather, but there could be some locally heavy rain, especially for the Florida Panhandle on Monday. Here's a look at snow totals here over the next 60 hours. Highest amounts outside of the upper Midwest will be in the West Virginia mountains, but we also will see significant amounts in the New Hampshire and Vermont mountains, locally 6 inches plus. The lower elevations could see an inch or two, and then the upper Midwest will have a decent amount of snow as well. And I'm going to show that to you here in just a second. You can see amounts over a foot just northeast of the Arrowhead of Minnesota up into northwest Ontario, maybe over 10 inches on the Keweenaw Peninsula, 3 to 6 north of the Twin Cities into northern parts of Wisconsin, and we'll see a few inches as well in northern parts of lower Michigan. And as we head this into New England and give you a closer view, you can see outside of the mountains, not really a big deal, but we could see some light amounts for the Maine seacoast, for central Maine as well, for southern New Hampshire, for parts of Massachusetts and southern Rhode Island. Enough to cover the ground, but really not a whole lot more than that. Looking at temperatures, it's cold out west. You can see we rebound into the 60s and lows and 70s today in southern Cal, but only 50s in the Phoenix area. Tonight, though, we are going to have freezing temperatures for many, except for the coast here. And then tomorrow will still be a chilly day here, and then cold again tomorrow night. But the real cold is confined to the central United States here, and I'm going to show that to you in just a moment. There we go. Sorry about that. You can see here that not a cold day today, but here comes the next wave of cold into the Dakotas tonight, below 0 degree temperatures, lasting for most of the day tomorrow in northern North Dakota and Minnesota, then really dropping off tomorrow night. Behind our Clipper, we're going to get down to as cold as 20 below 0. And freezing temperatures as far south as Little Rock and Dallas again. We'll still keep some of that snow on the ground before we slowly rebound for Monday. But overall, next week is not going to be as cold of a week, and I'll show that to you in a little bit. I want to show you this first. This is the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It is something that progresses across the equatorial regions, and right now it's strongly cold in the Western Hemisphere. When you see this leaning to -3 on phase 1, that is indicating the cold. Now, it does moderate some here after the 15th, but we're still in a cold phase until we get to about the 25th or so, and then you'll see it heads back towards neutral. And then phase 4 is a warmer phase in February. So we are still going to be stuck in this cold pattern for the next few weeks with some relief coming, but not much. And as negative as this gets here, that certainly is something we need to be watching for. This is the Arctic Oscillation. It's negative now. It will go positive next week for a few days and then drop back down to negative. So we are going to still see cold air on this side of the globe here, right on into Martin Luther King Day, Inauguration Day, and then temperatures will slowly come back up. I want you to follow the green line more than the blue. The blue is just one solution, whereas the green is the mean. And you can see eventually we do see some rebounding here for the last week of January. Whoops, let me come back to that real quick. Now, the EPO is negative again next week and beyond, indicating that much of the U.S. is going to be cold. The Western Pacific Oscillation is positive now, but again goes to negative, shutting off the Pacific and allowing the cold to come back down here again, and it stays down there until we get to the very end of the month. The NAO is negative as well, allowing that cold to come in to eastern Canada and the eastern United States. It does go back up to about neutral, and then it drops back down here for next weekend and beyond. And that is the timeline we're going to have to be watching more closely, especially when you see this trend back to 0 between about the 20th and the 22nd of January. That is the area that we do need to be keeping an eye on for the East Coast for some potential mischief. And that is just a combination of the cold, what we call 50-50 low in place over the North Atlantic, cold coming down in the eastern U.S., and then eventually as we migrate to a more progressive pattern, we may see a storm moving through that flow. So I didn't want to get too technical with you all, but I think that's kind of important to mention. I've talked about it before. The PNA is pretty much neutral. It's actually a little bit positive, but goes back to neutral. So the ability to get it to get really cold in the southeast isn't strong, but it's still there as we get to next week and even into the following week. So let's take a look at what's going to happen here in the upper levels. Our first trough moves offshore. Here comes the next wave of cold, starting in the west and the north central U.S., and then eventually we see that sliding through the northeast. Now, we do have a ridge that builds in over the Caribbean and Southern Gulf, and an even bigger ridge that builds in over the western United States. What this is going to do is split things up to where the real cold air retreats somewhat into New England, and then the source for Pacific moisture and storm energy actually gets shunted to near California and on south. We have to watch where it sets up in Southern Cal. We actually may get some rain out of it, which would be great. But if it's a farther south here and brings that dry easterly flow or southeast flow, that won't be good either. You can see, though, beyond next week here, we get to push more cold air into the northwest and into the north central United States next weekend. And finally, all this energy off the Pacific coast is starting to get picked up by that trough. And this is the look of a much colder and stormier pattern for many of us here by the 20th or so. And in particular, the southern and eastern United States here for the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Eventually, it does lift out towards the following weekend and high pressure builds back in. And this has the look more of what we saw between Christmas and New Year's. But you can see until we get to that point, things are certainly looking a lot more favorable for winter weather to come back. So we are going to take a look at temperatures aloft, and you'll see a quick shot of cold moving into the east next week, but then we warm back up late next week. But then here comes the next shot of cold, and this one is going to be a significant wave of cold again. It starts in the plains on the 19th, which is next Sunday, and then it advances eastward. And much of the central and eastern United States are likely to be at or below average, and significantly at or below average, depending on how deep this cold air mass gets. But we're talking between the 20th and the 23rd for our best chance of that cold wave. And then temperatures will slowly start to rebound a little bit here towards the end of the month. Here's a look at the upper level pattern, and you can see why we had problems in California. With this upper low a few days ago, we had strong winds out of the northeast, taking those the winds down the mountains to the coastline and allowing those fires to burn. Now, we still have strong flow out of the north and eventually the northwest here this weekend. You see this next trough swings through here. But as we get past, say, Monday, we do lighten that flow significantly if this cutoff continues to distance itself from the coast. And then what's going to end up happening is our faster flow is going to be across the northern United States and not the southern United States, which will be good for California. Now, over time, you'll see impulses of energy that swing southeastward here, bringing the cold in waves to the eastern United States. But we're not done with what's south of California. That is just kind of meandering here, taking a Pacific vacation until the end of next week. Eventually, a bigger trough comes down, and that starts drawing this moisture across the southern United States again in a setup that will look very similar to what we just dealt with here over the last couple of days. This is the 20th and 21st, and it looks more promising for something in the southern and eastern United States. Again, the details are going to be very low in confidence for the time being, but we do see that threat, and then maybe even a more substantial storm at some point here before things quiet down towards the weekend after next. Here's the operational GFS that's just come in. And you can see outside of some cold rain down south and some snow across the Great Lakes and Northeast, it is a pretty quiet setup, while the West is pretty quiet as well. Then we get to the end of next week, and we start to see that Pacific energy sending moisture back into the South Central states. And this first piece of energy, the timing on it can change, but you are going to notice a couple of things. One is that it's going to get wetter in the Southeast, and two is that we have a bigger shot of cold coming down with this 1052 high pressure next weekend. Now, if the two link up, we get the timing just right, we could certainly see unsettled weather in the southeast, and I would say snow and ice would be a decent possibility. You can see a couple different threats here on the GFS. Don't get too carried away with any one particular model, but you can see here this chance is definitely better than what we would expect in a typical winter. Here's the Canadian model showing a similar threat here, albeit a more organized one. This is a week from today, and it does warm up, but then here comes the cold. And then the moisture runs up and over the cold, and we have a winter storm from the southwest right across the deep south and coming up the east coast again. And yes, I know it shows snow and ice, And we don't know if it's going to be ice in Raleigh, rain or snow. We don't know if it's going to be a blizzard in the Northeast yet, but we do know that there will likely be some sort of a significant storm system or even two waves of low pressure. Here's a look at the European AI real quick. You see that it's mild down in the southeast, but then here comes the cold next Saturday. And we're going to have to watch these impulses that come out of the Gulf of Mexico as they track northeast. This looks a lot more favorable for ice in the Piedmont, snow in the Mid-South, and snow moving up the East Coast around MLK Day and then in the following days after that. And a pretty significant shot of cold as well behind it. So as far as snow totals, we can't get specific. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh, we're going to have a major blizzard on the 22nd because we don't know that yet. But what you will see is that outside of the Great Lakes and the Mid-South here, we don't really get a great chance for snow until we get into late next weekend. Then we see chances rebuilding around the Great Lakes and into the Ohio Valley next weekend. And then we see even better chances starting to spread eastward here and southward around the 20th and 21st. And we bring back this potential for snow into Texas, into Georgia, into Louisiana, into the Carolinas, and even more so into New England in that area that's been dealing with the snow hole here. So definitely more favorable times ahead for us. And my future weeks and future days will be watching this for you all. I will try to be back on here tomorrow as well before I have to travel to Texas for a few days. I may not have time to do anything for you then, and I apologize for that, but I'll keep you all posted as much as I can. So thank you so much for joining me here on this wonderful Saturday. I hope you all have a blessed day. I do want to give all the credit, all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has given me this platform to be able to share encouragement with other folks. And Paul tells the church of Colossus in the book of Colossians 1, 20, I think it's 21 through 24, he says, and you who once were alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now he has reconciled in the body of his flesh through death to present you holy and blameless and above reproach in his sight. If indeed you continue in the faith, grounded and steadfast, and are not moved away from the hope of the gospel which you've heard, which was preached to every creature under heaven, of which I, Paul, became a minister. And Paul tells us that if you stay grounded in your faith, if you hold on to your beliefs, you go through all the battles here, continuing to look to God, repenting to God, he will continue to hold you holy and blameless through the reconciliation with Jesus' death and resurrection. And that is the good news that I wanted to share with you today, because I think it's very easy to get carried away with what we do to earn money, the family that we take care of, and to forget why we are here in the first place and where we can be eternally when our time here on earth is gone. If you have any prayer requests, I will be happy to spend time in prayer for you, and I hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday. See y'all soon. Take care.